Okay, well, welcome back. And today, yet again, we have a couple of articles that I picked out where we're gonna, similar to my other video, we're gonna learn to read. We're gonna do it together. So, for this one, I've chosen two articles here, but I've decided to pick the state of Oregon, and we're gonna talk about their education requirements or education requirements for high school students. That you'll see they have changed a little bit. But we're going to see two examples of some good reporting and some very questionable reporting, and we're going to compare the two and learn how to figure out whether or not what would be reputable and what not, and then we're going to look at the language that they use in them and kind of see how you can get a little bit of a miscommunication, a little false narrative by reading one and not the other. So we're going to start here with the New York Post. And the reason why we're starting with this one is because a couple of days ago I saw a TikTok video where they used this particular article to put commentary on. So we're going to go through it. We're going to actually read the article, which I'm pretty sure the person in the TikTok didn't. But as usual, we'll start. So, okay, it says, Oregon governor signs bill suspending math reading requirements for high school graduates. Now, let's look from that headline. So they use the word suspending. So that doesn't mean this is permanent. That means it's just temporary. They're getting rid of these requirements. Now, math reading requirements. Now, requirements can mean a lot of things. And as you're going to see when we look at the other article, this is a very vague term and makes it sound a lot more menacing than it really is. The date, August 10th. So not too long ago, only a couple of days. About 8 days ago? Yeah. So we'll scroll down and we'll start. So Governor Kate Brown, the Oregon Democrat, signed a bill last month with little fanfare that drops the requirement that high school students prove proficiency in reading, writing, or math before graduation, a report said. A couple of things let's notice right here, or a few things to notice right here in this first paragraph. So one, they talk about, instead of saying suspended, okay, notice how up here they talk about, we're just suspending. But then here they talk about drop, as in drop being drops completely, right? Like drop would mean it's gone, it's gotten rid of, they're not even using it anymore. And then they use another vague set of words here when they say prove proficiency. So that's pretty vague, right? We don't know exactly what that means. It removes, they're getting rid of these requirements in reading, writing, and math, but what does prove proficiency mean? That could mean a lot of things, right? So it kind of it misleads you, I'll say it, into thinking that you don't have to be good at math or reading, you don't have to know any of that stuff, right? Also, a part to note, this section here, originally published by Fox News. So you can tell what kind of article this is. Obviously, Fox News, a very right-leaning news outlet. New York Post, also reasonably right-leaning. Okay, so the Oregonian, which sounds like a race from Skyrim, but whatever, reported that the governor has seemed to avoid discussing Senate Bill 744. Her move to sign the bill was not public until recently because her office did not hold a signing ceremony or issue a press release. The paper also pointed out that the bill was first signed on July 14th, but not added to the state's database until July 29th. This paragraph is garbage. I don't understand why they added this in here. Yes, okay, it was originally signed on the 14th, not online until the 29th. Okay, so are they trying to establish that the governor's office was trying to be misleading, was trying to hide it? I have no idea. Then says Brown's office did not immediately respond to an after-hours email from Fox News. Again, kind of pointless, but whatever. So in June, state lawmakers voted to approve the bill that suspended the requirements for students for 3 years. Okay, KATU reported. KATU, I think, is a radio station. Foundations for a Better Oregon said in a statement at the time that the bill is intended to truly reflect what every student needs to thrive in the 21st century. Supporters of the bill insist that considering math and reading essential skills has been an unfair challenge for students who do not test well. Now they're talking about testing, which is interesting because up here we're talking about, we say prove proficiency, which you could say means testing. We're talking about dropping requirements, all this, but here's what we actually say. They actually say the word test here, okay? The report said that the requirement was first suspended at the start of the pandemic. Next, we have the KATU report pointed out that Republicans have come out against the bill and claim it lowers expectations for our kids, but there was some bipartisan support, okay? And then we have Charles Boyle, the Deputy Communications Director from Brown's office. It's the governor, right? Brown? Yeah, Brown was the governor. Just making sure we're keeping all the actors or all the players in line here. It says, it told the paper in an email that staff from the governor's office informed legislative staffers about the bill's signing on the day it was passed. He also said that the new standards for graduation will help benefit the state's Black, Latino, Latinx, Indigenous, Asian, Pacific Islander, Tribal, and students of color. The paper reported that the bill could stay in effect for 5 years until new requirements. So this is also kind of vague. It could stay in effect for 5 years. Okay, it has a possibility for it. It's not guaranteed. Again, this could be a little bit to fearmonger about, oh my God, 5 years, but let's read on. The paper's editorial staff urged Brown to veto the bill back in June. Okay, I guess that means the Oregonian or Aragonian, whatever it's called. Oregon schools were among the last in the country to reopen to in-person instruction during the pandemic, an editorial read. I wish they said where they got that editorial, but okay. Our legislators should be focused on how to help students regain the ground they've lost after a year and a half of distance learning and hybrid instruction, not on lowering our standards. Now, first thing I noticed when reading this was that other than the brief mentions, like up here and down here, they don't really mention what specific requirements were dropped or suspended or anything like that. They never really go into any detail and say, pre or before this bill was signed, the requirements were X, Y, and Z, and after the bill was signed, now they're A, B, and C. It doesn't say that. So that's where I immediately, flag on the play here, because this is very non-specific. We don't really know exactly what's being suspended. It sounds kind of vague. We can come. This allows me as the reader to come up with a lot of speculation as to what that actually means. So let's take that, keep this in mind, the way this is written, and let's look at the other article from a much more reputable source here, which is the Associated Press. Much more reputable. So let's start with their headline. New Oregon law suspends graduation testing requirement. So if we look at the other one was talking about graduation requirements and didn't specify testing in that one section, whereas this one specifies testing requirements. Also August 13th, so a little later, 3 days after that one was written. Also, a much shorter article, so cuts to the chase. So let's begin. So in Oregon, a new Oregon law that suspends a requirement for a basic skills test in math, reading, and writing to graduate high school is being praised by advocates as a way to rethink education standards and sharply criticized by others as a misguided effort that will hurt children's learning in the long run. Already from this first paragraph, we have an abundance of more information than the other article, right? This is just says, okay, new law, again, suspends a requirement specifically for a basic skills test. So that's it, right? There's nothing, they're not burying the lead, they're not fear-mongering, right there. Well, let's read on. Democratic Governor Kate Brown signed Senate Bill 744 last month without much attention. The measure temporarily eliminates essential skills testing through the 22 to 23 school year. So that'll be next year. Not this coming September, but next September is what I believe that means. It's been a while since I've been in high school. So notice how it still uses the temporary suspends. It's making sure that this is temporary, and it's specific to just testing, right? They're not talking about graduation requirements or anything. They're just talking about testing, not necessarily what you're learning in those classes. That requirement had been put on hold amid the coronavirus pandemic, which forced the closure of many schools and students to learn remotely. Same information as before. That's pretty standard, or that one's pretty identical. The Oregon Department of Education has said the new law will allow the state to develop more equitable graduation requirements. Officials have been told to compare diploma requirements in different states and find ways to reduce disparities and ensure that graduation requirements are fair. So already what we have from this paragraph, we have way better information and also a lot gentler information, right? So it's not going for that immediate fear monger. They're trying to do this, they're trying to do that. It basically just says, hey, they're reassessing the graduation requirements for their state, and they're going to look to make some changes. Maybe they're going to try to see if they can affect graduation rates, right? Because obviously the more students you have graduating from your school, the better it looks, the better your state does, and all that kind of stuff. So they want people to graduate high school. And they're looking at adjusting the requirements from a purely like test focused way to maybe some other ones. They want to look at it and even said compare diploma requirements in different states and see, hey, what are other states doing, right? Because this is just Oregon. Maybe they're going to look at Washington State or California or whatever, and see how they stack up to them, which is fine. That this is something that school districts and education departments stuff do all the time. This is nothing out of the ordinary. Continuing on, the Senate Bill 744 does not remove Oregon's graduation requirements, and it certainly does not remove any requirements that Oregon students learn essential skills. We're going to read this again because this is very important. Senate Bill 744 does not remove Oregon's graduation requirements, and it certainly does not remove any requirements that Oregon students learn essential skills, Department spokesman Mark Siegel told Portland TV station KATU. Now, this should be familiar because we read about them in the other article. But notice how this Mark Siegel fellow, not even mentioned in the other article. They just leave that whole quote out, which is a really darn good quote because it's kind of puts a lot of stuff into perspective. But for whatever reason, that other article decided to leave that out completely. Rochelle Chase, I hope I'm saying that correctly, founder of MXM Block, an advocacy group led by Black women and focused on education and other social justice issues, said certain children struggle with exams and had been hurt by the testing requirements. Now, I'm not sure who this person is, but their organization seems to look at social justice issues in education, which is fine. And this line here, certain children struggle with exams. Now, again, like I said, it's been quite a long time since I've been in high school, but there were definitely people when I was there of all backgrounds that struggled with testing, right? In class, it was easy to read the material and to learn about it, but when it came to certain tests, and especially certain test styles, whether they're, say, true-false questions, short answer, essay questions, multiple choice, whatever it ends up being, some students just have difficulty with certain tests, right? With certain types of testing. So they may know the material, but they might not be it might not be picking out the right information out of like multiple choice tests. And a lot of these tests rely on just straight memorization, which we've been finding in recent years and a lot more studies and information that we have now, that just straight memorization is not really a good way to learn. You don't really remember the material as well. You just remember it to learn it and repeat it for a test. You don't actually like learn to use material and critically think and stuff like that. Or in the case of commenters on the internet, and apparently the New York Post, you don't learn to read. So so that's something that people have been doing. This has been going on for a few years now in terms of looking at the way that schools do testing. The quote, under the best of circumstances, in totally normal times with no pandemic, there are a number of children who don't test well, Chase said, including children of color, those in need of special education, low-income students, and early language learners. She added that it's not a deficit on the part of those children. Now, this again, we just talked about this. This is true. There are certain students that, for the way that the testing is set up, they just don't do as well as others. Some people are just really good test takers. But others say testing is an important tool to assess students' learning, and that eliminating the requirement could be harmful. They serve as checkpoints so that any kids who need extra help in getting those extra requirements, we can get them extra help to make sure they can graduate with the same proficiency as their peers. And this is from Mackenzie Pulliam, I hope I'm saying that right, founder of the Oregon Moms Union. So already we're seeing that in the New York Post article, they included some pointless paragraphs. They talked a lot about like the timeline or whatever. It doesn't seem to matter. They didn't even mention that Mark Siegel fellow from the other article. Now, they did talk about this KATU report. They seem to go into a little more detail than it, or about it, in that they seem to reference it a lot more. They also look at a different person. Oh, Jesus. They also look at this guy, Charles Boyle, who's the communications director for the office of the governor. So they have a few different sources, but the overall message still kind of is the same. And But you can just see like the overall message for theirs is they seem a lot more focused in the post on removing requirements, that they're really making it sound like graduating is going to become easier, where there's less requirements and they're just going to be letting anybody in. When in actuality, if we read a much more non-biased, much more reputable news source, we see that that's not the case, right? So there's testing requirements, right, that they're getting rid of because they are finding that certain students may learn the material and do well in class but not take the test. I'm sure, like when I was in high school, we had students like this. I'm sure other people have as well, that they do really well in class, they do the homework, they do the assignments, the reports, whatever you have to do, but when it comes time for the test, they're just not very good and they can bomb tests. Yeah, I remember being in school and there was a lot of things you read research about what you ate for breakfast that morning, or if you ate a bigger lunch, and what time of day you took the test and everything like that. That those actually all kind of affected how you did on a test, and they can definitely change the outcome. So all in all, this new law, this bill seems pretty okay, right? They're not just going to be shuffling kids through high school and letting everybody graduate and whatever, but like they're going to still have the requirements of the things that they learn, which is what's really important. As we see, of course, in the quote, that they're not going to be testing, but they're still going to be learning the same material, okay? Which is really what's important, right? Like, as long as they're learning the material, you're good. So, but again, I hope this was like useful, I guess, for everyone, that you understand like how to assess news sources and what you're looking at if you're looking at two different articles and kind of figuring out, okay, well, what actually happened here. And like I said, a lot of the reactionary people use that New York Post article, and of course everyone's talking about this like it's going to be the end of the world, and that these kids in Oregon are just all going to be dumb, and they're going to just push people through. Hell, I've even heard some critiques of this talk about like, oh, this is what critical race theory looks like. But if we, even across two articles, one much more balanced, and even the New York Post itself never mentioned that anywhere, so that's not the case at all. So yeah, again, whenever you hear something that sounds outrageous, always try and find the source, especially on TikTok. I've seen that a lot. Always look, whenever somebody shows an article on TikTok, I always look and see, do they show the top of the page? Do they show you where they're getting that from? And then you can just Google the article from there. But yeah, always try to find better sources. Always try to look up any article that somebody brings up or uses as reference, so that way you can go and read it for yourself, because sometimes it's not true at all, or it's just blatantly exaggerated. Anyway, well, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will have more videos for you in the coming weeks.